You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Modern Musicology. My name is Alan, and I've got two of my best friends with me. One of them is Rob Levy.
Greetings and felicitations.
And the other one is Stephanie Seymour.
Hello, people.
And we're going to put on our red shoes and dance the blues because it is 1983, baby. Where were you two in 1983? What were you doing? What was your life in 83?
I was in high school. I was a junior in high school.
Yeah.
So I was like 17 for half that year. And playing drums in my high school band to a lot of these albums that we're going to talk about tonight.
Nice.
I was, believe it or not, 15 years old.
Yes, you were.
This is probably the year, building up to it was kind of happening, but this is probably the year of my musical awakening. I went to Hollister, California to see my grandfather because my grandma was ill. And he had a shortwave radio in his den, which his den is just like the coolest space ever known to man. And I could pick up a station that I've now learned is, I think, KUSF.
Oh, yeah. Great station.
And like that, I literally just kept picking up all these stations on the West Coast. And I'm like, what is this? What is this music? Oh, my God, this is all amazing. And I came back just nuts. And I was getting ready for high school, and I listened to music. But this is when I really sort of started to have my deep dive fanaticism with music. I didn't know at the time, but I picked all the bands that weren't cool. Which really would have helped me about a year later. And, I was reading a lot and I was, listening to music and watching baseball, and that's it.
Where were you, Alan?
Well, I was 2 years out of high school and I was working at an office supply company. I had not yet started my job in music retail, which I think that was 85. And that was one of the best jobs I've ever had. Didn't make any money off of it, but I loved it so much. So in a couple of years, when we do our episode on 1985, buddy, I'm going to have all kinds of record store stories to tell. But for right now, we're talking about 1983. And my God, there is so much stuff that happened in 1983. So much that we are going to divide this episode into two parts, and we're only going to cover January through June in this episode. And I still think that's going to be too much, because when you look down through the list of, like, you go to Wikipedia and you just look at the list of stuff that came out in 1983, just the most massively successful albums. It's like one after another of just classic, big selling, huge albums.
Yep. Of all different genres too.
Right. Holy cow, do we have a lot to talk about. So let's just get started. It's January 1983. And one of the very first records that comes out that year is Sweet Dreams by the Eurythmics. I mean, this is the record that really puts them on the map as far as like American general awareness goes. This is the thing that launches them.
Yeah. And it's actually their second album, which I always thought when I was that age that it was their first, but this album was recorded in the attic of an old warehouse in London. They spent like 7 months living and working there. And then they went to like a little room in a studio in London and recorded the rest there, but basically on an 8-track tape machine. And it was a huge breakthrough for them, both sides of the Atlantic. I mean, to me, her voice is like a force of nature. It could be like soft and sweet, and then can just
Yep.
like blow the roof off the house. I mean, she's just got such a unique tone. And I think that her kind of gender bender image in that first few videos series,
Yeah.
Love is a Stranger and Sweet Dreams, really just like, it was shocking. It was gorgeous. It was just everything. She just had the whole package, and it was just an absolute smash, especially with MTV playing the shit out of it.
Right.
Actually, weirdly enough, a bigger hit over here than over there,
Mm-hmm.
too, which is very strange. They always were more popular in the States than they were in Britain, which was probably, I think, because they didn't sound like anything over here.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of electronic music kind of filtrating through that year.
When we had Richard Evans on, and he's the author of the book Listening to the Music the Machines Make, and it's a book about the early days of electronic pop. One of the things that I meant to bring up in that episode and didn't get a chance to is that I read that Dave Stewart kind of described the early Eurythmics music as a cross between Kraftwerk and Motown.
Huh.
What an interesting, who would ever think to put those two things together? But it's such a perfect description.
Yeah.
Yes, that is such a cool.
It is interesting because you have this movement in England going on where you have the Eurythmics, and as we'll get to later, Soft Cell is sort of doing some Northern soul stuff with their stuff. Heaven 17's doing it. You're starting to see soul music kind of infiltrate electronica.
Mm-hmm.
As big a hit as Sweet Dreams was, my favorite track on the album is Love is a Stranger.
Oh my God.
Mine too.
Me too.
Oh
Yes.
my God, that song blows me away. I love it so much.
And the video.
Yes. Actually, I don't even know if I remember the video, but the song.
She's like dressed as a man and a woman in that video.
Oh, that's right.
And
I
she's in a
remember
car and like,
that.
yeah.
Yeah,
so cool.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah. I
he's the
love
chauffeur,
that song.
yeah.
It's so ethereal and so angelic, but in a weird way, It's just.
Yes, like creepy almost. What's
exactly.
going to happen? Like it should be a soundtrack to a movie. Someone should make that a movie.
You can hear the Grace Jones in that too, which I love. But that is also my favorite track on the record.
Definitely.
And back in the day when I used to DJ out, that was the one I played, right? Because you can do so many things with it.
The cool thing about that was actually a flop. They released that first, I think, and then when it didn't do well, and then Sweet Dreams came out, and then they re-released Love is a Stranger as a single.
Yeah. It's got that little thump, 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 and then kicks in. It's really good.
Yeah.
Also, roughly the first week of January, I don't think anybody knew it was going to sort of shake the foundation of the world. And I know we're going to talk about it later, but Michael Jackson released Billie Jean in the first week of January, and it did not relent a position on the charts. And that record was a tidal wave on both MTV and radio. And it just sort of set the table, I think, for everything else that followed. So I just wanted to at least give a slight nod to that.
Oh yeah, that's a huge one. Totally changed the MTV landscape.
It did.
And it's interesting because January, you get a lot of records that shape MTV for the next 3 or 4 years. So you got those two records, and then you've got Nena. Nena was part of that sort of German new wave that was going on. So the new wave that hit America in 83 had already hit Germany in like 80 and 81. And it resonated stronger because they had Bowie in Berlin and sort of a lot of other things to sort of predicate that moving. But there's DAF, there's Nena, there's all these German new wave bands popping up that are taking the sounds of Bowie and Kraftwerk and doing things with them, right? And Nena does something different for German pop music in that she's a very strong woman fronting a band. And, for years, German pop records have been German pop records, and this thing goes international, and suddenly she has to learn English to record it in English. Yeah. And then forever, we're stuck with 99 Luftballons, right? There's also a really great song called Nürgerhaupt or something. My German is terrible. That's almost just as good. The rest of the record is really, really tight. Mm-hmm. But that also sort of piggybacks with the Eurythmics and some of this like new wave stuff that's coming over. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting that, that record sort of also brings the other thing into 1983 that sort of was prevalent in music. And I know you're going to talk about U2 later, Steph, but that sort of like living with the bomb thing that's around a lot in 83, 84, and 85 in pop records.
Right. Exactly. Like you just nailed it for U2 with Seconds. That was really about the nuclear proliferation, you know?
Yeah.
This is all interesting because you have that kind of music, but then you also have massive hits by Def Leppard coming out. So they released Pyromania, right, on the 20th of January, which is their third album. But this was their massive breakthrough, and really because I think they sort of went a little bit away from the really hard rock that they were doing their first couple albums, and they had a little more pop. Mutt Lange produced this. And they also actually, this was as their rhythm guitarist Pete was kind of on the way out. He played rhythm guitar on the album, but this is when Phil Collin actually joined the band and was doing all like the lead stuff. Yeah.
And that record is still, it has aged well. Right?
It has. It sounds relevant today. I mean, Photograph, Rock of Ages, Foolin', there are so many great songs. It sold like 10 million copies in the US alone.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, is they're from Sheffield, right? And they sound like none of the other bands from Sheffield, but Sheffield had such a great music scene going on at the time that you've got the guys from Cabaret Voltaire and Jarvis Cocker and all these other guys that are like, good for you. They're like all pushing for each other. So when Def Leppard makes it, all these people you don't expect to be in the same camp are like, this is amazing.
They were all very young guys too, and they were really young, super young when they first started out. So they're still all in their real early 20s at this point.
Yeah,
you know?
I was in on the Def Leppard train right at the beginning, and I remember seeing some rock magazines with them in it, and they were the first band that I can remember seeing that wore their influences on their sleeve, like literally, because they were pictured in this magazine wearing like Bowie t-shirts and things of like. They're advertising other bands basically on, instead of themselves. And I thought that was really interesting. I'd never seen a band do that before. And I thought,
that's cool. Look. I don't remember that because I just remember looking at Joe Elliott's face and Rick Savage's face and being like, they're so cute.
Yeah. Well, sure. And I do love the singles off that album, but there's 3 tracks, like deep cuts that I really love. And that is Rock Till You Drop, Die Hard the Hunter, and Coming Under Fire. Such a good album. Such a good album. Another one in the hard rock vein is Triumph, Never Surrender. But I love Triumph, and this was a big album for them. Just a great band. But one that Steffi, I know that you want to talk about a little bit, and that's Bryan Adams, Cuts Like a Knife.
I do. And I was never a Bryan Adams fan when it came out. I didn't appreciate, I think that his voice, first of all, because he's just got an amazing rock voice. But actually he's a really great songwriter too. And he's written with a lot of people, but I mean, that just talk about another album that just blew someone's career wide open. Cuts Like a Knife was everywhere. You couldn't get away from it. And at that point, like I said, I kind of didn't really want to hear it. but now I look back on it and I say to myself, gosh, and just his whole career. I mean, he's a real rock and roller, I think. I don't know. I kind of have a deeper appreciation for him now.
Yeah, I don't know. He got a bit schmaltzy there for a while.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're schmaltz, but I'm saying I just think his voice is he's got such a rock voice. It's so good.
I liked him well enough at the time, but the title song, Cuts Like a Knife, I absolutely love. And I've got a Kiss connection to this album.
Oh.
He and I can't remember the guy who produces him. Anyway, the two of them kind of got brought in to the Kiss camp to do some co-writing. And one of the tracks that ends up on Kiss's Creatures of the Night album was called War Machine. And it's a big Gene Simmons song. And it sounds nothing like Bryan Adams. And you're like, I can't believe Bryan Adams co-wrote that song. But he co-wrote another one with Eric Carr, their drummer at the time, that Kiss didn't record, and it's on Cuts Like a Knife, and it's called Don't Leave Me Lonely. It is so good.
Oh,
Such a great song, and it was a co-write between Brian and Eric Carr.
okay.
So there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
I think that guy's got
Little
a lot
trivia
of
for you.
publishing credits.
Yeah.
In a completely different vein, well, two different veins, Brian Eno's atmospheres and soundtracks that he made with your good friend Daniel Lanois.
My good
Oh
friend.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Just a completely different record than anything else that came out that particular year.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Malcolm McLaren's Duck Rock.
Oh yeah.
Right. The thing is if you're going to cop from other people, at least make it good, right? And that's what he did well.
Mm-hmm.
And it does so many different things that I don't think people in 1983 really appreciated it. And it's much more revered now than I think it was when it came out. But it's a fascinating record to listen to now. It doesn't sound dated. Actually, the Eno record doesn't sound dated either, but it's just it's different. And then you also get the Minutemen. What Makes a Man Start Fires.
Yeah.
All those Minutemen records are huge.
Yeah.
There's some stuff in January that's going to really influence what we call American alternative music in the next 3 or 4 years, because you got the Minuteman record. You've got Pylon, I think their first album, Chomp or Champ. There wouldn't be an REM if that Pylon record doesn't drop, and Pylon really went hand in hand with REM, which we'll talk about eventually.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just to kind of go back to Duck Rock, I mean, you're right. Buffalo Gals and Double Dutch, I think it was. Dutch. Man, those, you just think about how also visually, like the videos for those were very, very striking. And I think like Art of Noise and stuff, kind of all that kind of stuff reminds me of, the way music was progressing. And yeah, he definitely had a kind of Svengali-ish like thing about him where he was really an influencer.
One last one that I want to get in before we leave January behind, because this is a transition record that's going to affect something a couple of months down the calendar here. And that is Black Sabbath releases a live album called Live Evil. And this is the end of the Ronnie James Dio era of Black Sabbath. He's pretty much out the door already at this point. And apparently the story goes that there was a little bit of a war in the studio where they're mixing the album and nobody's happy with it, and Tony Iommi will sneak in and do a remix on it and get it the way he wants it, and then Ronnie comes in and does it all again to get it the way he wants it. And so he felt like they kept trying to bury his vocals on the album because they were mad at him and he was gone and all this kind of stuff. And then they list him on the record as vocals by Ronnie Dio instead of Ronnie James Dio, which is the name he goes by, and he thought that was a big slap in the face. So it's a crazy situation. And that story we're going to pick up on in May. So, interesting. Intrigue. We'll leave you on a cliffhanger as we move into February. And February 1st, man, Frontiers by Journey. Are you excited about Journey, Steph?
Oh, yeah. Faithfully, baby. Faithfully.
Yeah.
Separate ways. I mean, I'm not excited by Journey because look, I also can appreciate the fact that Steve Perry has an amazing voice. They were all great players, but like those songs to me, then they were so not cool. But then I look back at stuff, and it wasn't on this record, but like the song Lights. I mean, I want to cover that song. It's so good. Like they had some really good pop stuff,
Yeah.
My local roller rink played those Journey records into the ground.
I'll tell you what, if you said the thing that pretty much sums up 1983, and that is roller rink.
Roller rink.
I mean,
That's
I
where
heard
the music lived.
Not counting stuff I heard, at my grandfather's den thing. The roller rink and the swimming pool. That's where you heard it.
True.
I really liked Separate Ways when that was the first single. Came out, and it was kind of a heavy single. It didn't sound like some of the previous Journey singles from previous albums, and so I really liked that. I got the album, and all the singles are good. Send Her My Love is a great song. Faithfully, I get a little tired of that, but it's a good song. But everything else on the record I absolutely love. Right in the middle of side 1, there's a song called Chain Reaction, which is a little heavier, and I love it. But then all of side 2, Edge of the Blade, Troubled Child, Backtalk, Frontiers, and Rubicon. Phenomenal. It's probably my favorite side of any Journey record.
Oh, I might have to actually go back and check that out then.
Yeah. Edge of the Blade
Because
is just a great rocker. Backtalk is kind of weird. Rubicon, it's just a great collection of stuff. So I highly recommend it. Who else
Rob,
has got something? Because if Rob doesn't, I'm going to have to jump in on Kilroy Was Here from Styx, and nobody wants that.
Please do Porcupine by Echoing the Bunnymen, Rob.
Well, I was going to talk about. I knew Alan was going to talk about Styx, so that's okay.
Oh man, of course.
So yeah, let's talk about Echoing the Bunnymen, Porcupine, which is fantastic. It wasn't at the time my favorite Echoing the Bunnymen record. It's the first album that a girl actually gave me. She didn't give it to me that year, but I got it about a year and a half, about 3 years later. Their artwork for all their album covers is great. Basically, for an Echoing the Bunnymen album cover, you have to go someplace and look as cold and miserable as possible to reflect the sounds of the music and the production. But that record's got some fantastic production on it, and the singles on it are great.
Cutter in the Back of Love. Oh man,
the Back of Love is great. Back of Love was kind of a single ahead of time. The Cutter's great.
Do you know they had to re-record that whole album basically?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, that's why it sounds so good. I mean, they first recorded and they were all miserable and whatever, and didn't come out as like the record company wanted to.
And they basically got said, you're going to redo this.
Yep.
And I think it's one of those times when a band sort of gets back in the studio and it gets fixed and all is well.
Yeah, I mean, as well as it could be for that band, but yes, because they were never like.
It's also the album that kind of got them over here.
Yeah,
they were kind of like a cult band. They're still a cult band, but there's definitely a momentum building with them leading up to Ocean Rain, and this record kind of really does some of that with it too. Great
album. Okay, Alan, you want to do Styx?
If we have to, okay. Styx put out Kilroy Was Here, and that was a letdown. After some massive and really, really solid and really creative albums like Grand Illusion and Pieces of Eight, and then they followed that up with a couple of like Cornerstone and Paradise Theater, which were pretty good albums. Kilroy was another step down, musically speaking, and the production on it is terrible. It just sounds thin and lifeless. There's actually some good songs on it, and I saw them in concert that year. And it was an interesting show. They tried to do a concept album that Dennis DeYoung was the driver of, and JY and Tommy did not like it. And they tried to do this stage production that sort of like encapsulated the story from the album, and it didn't make any damn sense. And it was a good show, but it was just weird. So, and then of course that produced the all-time classic, Mr. Roboto.
God.
Oh my God.
I hated that so much. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I was like, is this what we're doing now? We go from Grand Illusion, we go from like Come Sail Away and Fooling Yourself and Renegade and Blue Collar Man, and now we're going to do Mr. Roboto? What the fuck?
Because I feel like they were kind of trying to jump on the 80s bandwagon, and then that was their desperate attempt at some kind of, I don't know.
The sad thing is there's so many people that's the first Styx they heard. And that's how they define the band. And they don't really realize that there's so much more going on there.
I know. Well, that happens with a lot of bands. Tragic.
Yeah, and that's exactly something that I'm going to talk about in the second half of 1983, because when the Yes album comes out. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. But yeah, so that wasn't a super great album.
I think we have to move to something then that's the most, one of like the best album of the year possibly.
Gee, I wonder what that could be.
And it's War by U2. I know it came out.
I'm totally surprised. I had no idea that's what you were going to say.
Oh, I was like, are you? Did I fool you?
No, I'm kidding.
So listen. Oh God. It's almost hard to talk about some albums because they're like almost like they are you and you are them, because you're so attached to them emotionally and, at a young, impressionable age. And this album meant so much to me that it sort of like changed the course of my life when I heard it, because not only was I like practicing to these songs with my drums and learning how to, really be a good musician. We were playing these songs live when my high school band had gigs. this is why I started working in the music industry, right? Like I specifically wanted to work at the label that U2 was on. So I had, called Island to get an internship a few years later. But I mean, this album was, and I also saw this tour. I saw them on June 27th of 83. There's no bad song on this album. There's actually they're all, to me, they're like perfect songs. Like a Song is probably one of my favorite songs of all time. Two Hearts Beat is one. Surrender. I don't even know where to start. So this is also where they start being very political, like lyric wise, overtly kind of. Right. I mean, because Sunday Bloody Sunday is about the Troubles. Seconds, of course, we were saying nuclear war. And New Year's Day is about the Polish solidarity movement. And like, while this was lost on me, maybe a bit of this was lost on me at 16 years old, I knew that it had meaning and I knew that it had power. And it came through to a 16-year-old,
Boy, I loved New Year's Day when it came out. Yeah. I just thought it was so interesting and different, and it sounded like nothing else that I was hearing on the radio at the time. I thought it was great.
And you also get Two Hearts Beat is one and 40.
God,
40 is one of the best closing songs for an album.
Right.
Yep.
Agreed.
Steph and I will fight about this till she doesn't want me to be cool anymore and stabs me to my sleep. But I think it's the last good U2 record.
Oh yeah, I don't agree.
No, I don't agree with that either.
I don't agree. No, not
but
at all.
Hey, that's okay.
Yeah, that's
Friendship's intact.
We love.
And I say that because it's the last one where I liked everything about it, and it wasn't like I didn't like skip over songs or just bang. It's like firing bullets, just one after another. The whole thing, it's just
that stops right before you get to Unforgettable Fire, and that's a fucking great record.
It's a great record.
God,
so great.
But there's some hiccups on it.
Yeah.
Possibly. So this was, by the way, just War was the first UK #1 album that they had, and in the US it just reached 12, but still it pretty much blew them open too. Especially New Year's Day was just like massive hit. So
Also that year you've got a record that a lot of people sort of credit as really putting a stamp on what we call post-punk now, and that's the Orange Juice single "Rip It Up," and that comes out this month, and it sort of changes the game because like at this point the UK's got all these like really guitar driven indie like angsty records, and this is kind of got a little bit more funky kind of thing going on. It's somebody's been listening to Nile Rodgers, right? Somebody's been listening to some ska and they're making a record. Punk's still holding in there because the Ramones put out an album too. That's Subterranean Jungle, which is not their best but not their worst.
There was a couple others in February that I think were notable. Again, I didn't love them, but the Greg Kihn Band had Conspiracy, that record.
Yeah.
I mean, that just, it was all over. But a really cool record was Waiting by Funboy 3. And that's, again, notable because that has their version of Our Lips Are Sealed, which of course was a massive hit by the Go-Go's, but it was co-written by Terry in Funboy 3. So they did their version, and I don't know, The Tunnel of Love, a good song. So that was sort of like them and Bananarama, which I'm going to talk about when we get to March, I guess it is, had that kind of whole, messed up kind of look, like with like the Dexys Midnight Runners kind of look, with overalls.
We got Bow Wow Wow kicking around there too.
Yeah, it was like that kind of whole vibe. So I love Funboy 3. I think they're great.
They're fun.
And they're boys.
And there's 3 of them.
Righty.
Anyway, we ran that name into the ground. All right, so let's just jump into March then.
Oh man, March! Wow.
Yeah. I know you don't like Spandau Ballet, true, but it did come out then.
Dude, I love that song. I still love that song.
And there wasn't like the whole record. The record as a whole wasn't knock your socks off, I don't think, but I thought it was a pretty record, but man, True was just a massive smash. And of course the whole new romantic thing was in full effect.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because Duran Duran does Is There Something I Should Know? It's like a one-off
Yeah.
that month.
Who wants to do Tears for Fears?
I will gladly start with one of my two of my all-time favorite records are out this month. Actually, and then Bananarama's in my top 10 too. But you have Tears for Fears and Mad World, which,
oh man,
my God, that record's just perfect.
Is it called The Hurting? Sorry, is it called
The Hurting? Is the album.
The Hurting, yeah.
Okay.
But like you listen to Mad World, you listen to Pale Shelter, you listen to Memories Fade.
Yeah,
it's like
Change.
It's definitely like a relationship record, but it's also sort of like this like nuclear winter breakup record, right? I can't really put my finger on it, but it's just, man, that record is just,
I know, it really gets you.
Yeah, I came into them like most Americans with Big Chair, and then went back and got The Hurting, and The Hurting is so different. It's so different than what you would expect to hear based on your first exposure to them being the Big Chair. And it took me a little time to get into it, but I really, really love it.
I didn't know I know this one better than the Big Chair. So I guess it would be in a way opposite.
I jumped in on this one.
Yeah.
And it was like, man, Mad World was like great. Change was fantastic.
Song for the Children.
I mean, Ideas as Opiates even. It's just like,
I love that one.
It's just, the whole thing is just like really fantastic.
Yep.
So I will.
But I think we talked about this in a previous show. What a huge stylistic jump from that first album to the second album.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were going in order, Big Chair would have knocked your socks off because it is so different, and it's so like such a jump in maturity and technical ability and composition and arrangement. I mean, it's just massive. It's just a huge difference.
And so the same day, so March 7th, the Hurting comes out, and also Bananarama's Deep Sea Skiving record, which I know it wasn't a super smash.
Oh, it's amazing.
You love it? Do you really love it?
I was 15 when that record came out, and I'm a boy. Come on. Well,
okay.
You know.
But it was great because
it was just the idea of it was fun. You know,
I still listen to that in my car. I listen
to it a lot. I knew at that age, it's like, I want a girl that's cool enough to rock overalls like that.
Totally.
And have cool hair. I'm like.
But the cool thing about them also was they did not want to be like a factory churned out girl group. And they co-wrote a lot of songs on that record that were hits. Yeah. And they really, from there, launched, they became quite popular, especially in the UK. I mean, they always weren't as like big here as they were in the UK, but they had pretty much lots of smashes here too. But yeah, I thought they were the coolest. I really did. I love them so much. And every song is so catchy on that album.
Our buddy Anthony, who is not here with us this week, he likes, I don't know if I can say love, but he likes Bananarama. Mm-hmm. He may love them. I don't know. So, I feel like this is a good month for him because another album that came out that month that is definitely an Anthony album, one of his absolute favorite bands, and that is Marillion, and they put out an album called Script for a Jester's Tear. Phenomenal record. I didn't come into Marillion until 1985 when they put out the single Kaylee, which got radio play and MTV play here in America, and nothing else prior to that really did. And then from there, I went back and started getting some of their earlier albums, and Script is one of my favorite Marillion records. It's just got some great songs, the title cut, Chelsea Monday, Forgotten Sons. And one of the things that makes this record really good and really solid is that they worked on the songs for this record over like a 5-year period. Forgotten Sons started as a song called Alice. So there's like this long gestation period for the stuff that ends up on this record. And I think it proves out, because it's such a good, solid, well thought out, well composed record. Mm-hmm. So Anthony, that's for you.
Rock on, Anthony.
I guess the juggernaut in the room that we should talk about, because it wasn't part of a proper album per se, but New Order released Blue Monday in March of 1983.
Oh, yeah.
Hell yeah.
They basically almost bankrupted Factory Records because of the way they wanted the sleeve to be. So it's like this cool record in terms of like album art and album sleeves, but then it's also this like huge dance record that 40 years later does not sound like a 40-year-old dance record at all.
Yeah.
And then, we've got OMD and Dazzle Ships, which came out 3 days before the Tears for Fears record. And like Tears for Fears, they have this sort of Cold War vibe, and it's kind of a little political undertone. But they take shortwave radio recordings from the Eastern Bloc and put them on records. And they put like just these weird electronic compositions that people at the time were like, this is okay. But now it's like, this is a masterpiece, right? Like it's this run where OMD has like these 2 or 3 albums that are just not of the time. And I think people don't really get it. And then the light switch went on later, right? But like you get a lot of fantastic songs on there. The whole album sort of is a concept album in many ways. Telegraph is like painfully catchy, but you've got this theme of like little radio snippets going all the way through. And you've got things like Silent Running and Radio Waves that sort of hold everything together as well. And this record had a profound effect on Vince Clarke, who would go on to do some other things. So that record. And then I'm going to throw a really weird wild card into all of this. And that was the month that Candy Girl by New Edition was released. Produced by Arthur. Right. Produced by Arthur Baker, who also produced New Order. Our remix, right? And the thing is like, okay, this is the record that introduced Bobby Brown to the world, which for what that is it is what it is. But it also sort of started this whole like revival of kind of like pop doo-wop. It's an interesting record now, and you can definitely hear a lot of musical influences later. Like you can hear where this record influenced a lot of other people. Also, 2 other records that I remember watching on TV that I still love a lot. ZZ Top's Eliminator came out that month. I think they had 6 videos on MTV.
Freaking huge, and they all looked the same. You couldn't tell.
And they were an event. Every ZZ Top video was an event, and they were smart enough to have themes recurring. They really got the idea of video as film.
100%. Yeah.
But that record, part of it charted on the disco charts. People forget that record did.
Was it Legs that did that for that? Maybe?
Legs did, and Give Me All Your Lovin' both did really well.
Give Me All Your Lovin', yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that record it's still great. I mean,
that's another one I kind of gained appreciation for as I
look
back.
People will slag this record off, and they're welcome to. But man, that Quiet Riot Mental Health record is just it's great.
Well, that's a good one, because that was going to be the next one that I brought up, because that leads into something else that I was going to say.
Well, go ahead.
But yes,
you take it.
That Quiet Riot record is the first metal album to hit #1. It changes the game for a lot of stuff, for a lot of the bands that are coming out of LA and San Fran and all that stuff. All these bands are going to start to get, because everybody wants to cash in on that mental health success. So every band on the scene, every good band on the scene, and a couple of shitty ones too, got record contracts over the next year or 2 years. And it just changes. And especially for MTV, that's the beginning of a big change, because MTV is about to become like all hair metal pretty soon.
Metal Central, yeah.
Metal Central.
And that's what we were talking about in the Tom Beaujour episode when we were, of our podcast with him when we were discussing the Sunset Strip scene, and how really this was a really significant year for like a lot of bands just starting to really ramp up, and get signed. And like Motley Crue had stuff, it was just like it was all coming out,
Twisted Sisters later. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that record, in terms of the video, for how they constructed the video, they kind of changed the idea of what a video could be.
Yeah.
And, they made a lot of people listen to glam, which is great. Go back and sort of re-examine glam. And it also, I think people don't realize that dude's voice is just.
Yeah. And you're talking about Come On, Feel the Noise, which was the second single and an enormous hit. And Kevin Dubrow, the singer, hated it and refused to record it. And they basically had to browbeat him into actually doing it. And then, of course, when he did, it became an enormous hit. But he resisted it. Yeah, exactly. exactly. But he resisted it for the longest time. He hated the
Really?
idea
I
of
didn't know
even
that.
doing covers. Oh yeah. So, but they talked him into it, and it worked out for him at least for a
Did.
year or so.
I got one
Yeah.
more I mentioned that for a March album that I would just want to just briefly mention is the
Yeah, yeah.
Tubes Outside Inside.
Oh wow.
Because She's a Beauty was their biggest hit of their career, I believe. It was like #1 mainstream rock chart, like number 10 pop single. And
Mm-hmm.
they, MTV was a really big help with that too, because they had interesting videos and stuff. But I think that deserves an honorable mention as a something
Well,
I really liked. I enjoyed it, but and
it
I
deserves a
believe
mention. I don't know how honorable it needs to be. Well, I think, you know what? I think we're going to take a break right here, and we're going to come back in about 30 seconds, and we're going to talk about April.
I'm Drew Leiter.
And I'm Cletus Jacobs.
And we're inviting you to join us as we delve into the dawn of the DC. We'll be reviewing new titles such as The Unstoppable Doom Patrol, Shazam, Green Lantern, Titans, Justice Society of America, and more. We'll also be reviewing DC Television's final season of The Flash, Titans, and Doom Patrol. Join us every week on the Earth Station DCU podcast, part of the ESO Network.
Guess what? It's April 1983. What's happening in April? There's some good stuff happening in April.
REM.
REM.
Murmur.
Holy Moses. That's a great, great record.
Oh, like for a debut album, I mean, I
Yeah.
know they had Chronic Town EP first, but whatever. I mean, it was voted Rolling Stone's best album of 1983, which is pretty impressive for a
Mhm.
debut album. Yeah.
Yeah. The first song on the record, Radio Free Europe. Holy cow, I love that song so much.
There's a review of Murmur that was really kind of cool. I thought it summed it up really perfectly, this whole album. Jonathan Gregg of Record. He said that it was, quote, a splendid little film noir of an album, austere but rich in implication. I thought that was
Ooh.
really like a lovely, and also he was sort of saying that that Michael Stipe's lyrics and his voice it was so hard to understand that it almost gave the album a meaning that even if you couldn't decipher his lyrics, it's still, you knew that there was meaning there underneath it all.
Interesting. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's super cool.
That's my big pick for April.
Well, okay. My big pick comes out 2 days later, and that is Bowie, Let's Dance.
Yeah.
The biggest selling album of Bowie's career. Like it or not,
Yep.
I know he went a little pop on this one, but, I think this is one of the best records of his career. And I know
Yes.
it's contentious to say that, but it's such a well-crafted album. Almost every song on it is superb. And the three big singles that they released from it, Let's Dance, China Girl, and Modern Love, were just all over the radio and all over MTV, and phenomenal success. And so I've got a whole story about how I really became a hardcore Bowie fan, but I'm going to save that for next year when we talk about 1984.
Okay.
See, this is kind of my jumping off point for Bowie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd heard some of the other like singles and stuff, but I never really this is when I was sort of all in at this point and went back to like the albums, not just the stuff everybody knew. And you watch the videos for that too, and this is an artist that clearly understands his visual and musical presentation.
Yeah.
It's also an artist that's like, yes, I'm going to have a track that's 8 minutes long, and it's still fantastic.
And let's not forget that record is really one of the things that launched Stevie Ray Vaughan into the public conscience. Holy shit, that was a big deal.
This is a little off the beaten track, but there was two really important hardcore albums that came out. Bad Brains, Rock for Light. Well, that was just, and Minor Threat, Out of Step. Yeah, Rob's like pumping his fist. So I think those were really, really important for the hardcore scene.
Well, and actually, Minor Threat, that Out of Step was huge. That record profoundly affected thrash metal and grunge
Yeah.
too, right?
Yeah.
My friends that really loved thrash metal were like, man, that Minor Threat record, that was one of the things that got me into it. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you listen to all these cats in the 90s that made grunge records, and they all talk about how much they loved Minor Threat.
Well, all these bands too that also loved Bad Brains, and just HR was like such a freaking force of nature.
Yeah.
He just I saw them live like so many times. It was just such an event to be at a Bad Brains show. You kind of always knew what you're going to get in a way, but you also never knew what you're going to get.
Seeing both of those bands was physically and mentally exhausting in every possible great way that you could go see a band.
Yeah.
You were just, your body was worn out, your ears were bleeding, and you sort of like were caught up in like this sort of spirit of like camaraderie with people at the show, especially those Bad Brain shows.
Oh, right? Man, I know.
Yeah. I only saw them twice, so I'm not as cool as you. A hilarious thing about, yes, that's the month that we got the first Kaja Gugu record. It's also the month that we got a record. There's a lot of records this month that I loved, and one of my 5 favorite records came out that month. It was Highland Hard Rain by Aztec Camera.
I saw them on that tour.
Yeah,
that was great.
Wow. Like Oblivious, Walk Out the Winter, Boy Wonders. It's just, it sort of catapults this like Scottish indie movement into like the mainstream. You had some of it with Orange Juice, but it's like this moment for Scottish pop music, and it starts this kind of wave where you got all these other bands from Scotland,
country and stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Roddy Frame was just a hell of a songwriter on this thing, and
it was a great debut. Yep.
That's, that thing is still perfect.
It is.
Also, Madness, because you get Our House and It Must Be Love.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And another band that I love is Madness. Toured with the Go-Go's, I think, on this tour.
I saw it.
Well, yes, they did. And I love that record a lot, so I'm going to throw that in. And I'd be remiss if I did not mention that Sparks released their 12th album.
Oh my God.
Right.
In 1983.
Right.
In outer space, which had cool places on it.
Right. Speaking of Go-Go's, Miss Jane Weedland.
Yep.
Is on that song and on Lucky Me, Lucky You.
Yeah. Which I like better than, but that's just
I don't think Cool Places is that great a song. It's incredibly repetitive.
But the video makes it.
Well, that's true. That's true. But I just don't think it's as good as Lucky Me, Lucky You.
No.
2 albums that just were also like kind of insanely huge was Men at Work, Cargo came out.
Yep.
Yeah, which again, I wasn't a major fan, but like they were everywhere. And
I wasn't either, but there's a couple, the 2 singles that were big here that came up from it is It's a Mistake, which is a great song.
Oh yeah.
And my favorite Men at Work song, Overkill. Holy shit, that is such a good song.
Yeah, their singles were really good. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And also Replacements, Hootenanny.
Yeah. Would love to talk about that record with somebody, but oh well.
We'll go back to that at some other episode, I'm sure.
It's also an interesting month because this is the year of the Flashdance phenomenon, because you get Maniac later and you get Flashdance. That record by Irene Cara was friggin' everywhere.
Oh,
that Flashdance, What a Feeling. It had this weird moment that came with this record, but when you strip all that other stuff away, it's a good little record. It's not great, it's not perfect, but it holds its own. I am very excited though that month is the month that we got Whammy by the B-52s.
Yeah, dog. Yes, I will say that after their first 2 records are pretty close to perfect.
Yes.
Starting with the 3rd record, which is Whammy, they started using a drum machine instead of live drums, and I really hate it. It changes the whole. It sounds plasticky. It sounds fake. I don't like it, but the songs are really good. Whammy Kiss, basically the title song, is one of my favorite. But a lot of the stuff from the 3rd and 4th albums sound much better live when they're played by an actual band. And Whammy Kiss is one of those. And Legal Tender is a great song.
Oh my
But
God, what a song.
My favorite one from this album, though, is basically a recipe, and it's called Butterbeans.
Butterbean!
Holy shit, I love that song so much. Everybody likes butterbeans. Oh, it is the wackiest, nuttiest song they have ever come up with. I mean, who would have thought to write an entire song about cooking butterbeans? But there it is.
Yep.
And it's
that's a great
wonderful. Such a good album.
That's a great album.
Okay,
yep.
I've got one more from April that I want to get into, and it's going to be a surprise. It's Michael Bolton.
I knew you were going to. I don't know why, but I knew you were going to say that.
But he started out as kind of a hard rock guy. And I actually saw him play. My very first concert ever was Kiss in 1979. And he was the lead singer of a band called Blackjack. And they opened the show. And Blackjack's lead guitar player is Bruce Kulick, who becomes Kiss's lead guitar player in about 5 or 6 years. So they were a great hard rock band. Michael Bolton's first record, I only ever heard the single that they released off of it, and it's called Fool's Game, and it's so cool. You would never think that he was going to go off a few years later and sing like Dock of the Bay and shit like that. Ugh. Yeah, so I'm not a Bolton fan, but he started out okay.
Well, these are albums that like sort of either launched the careers of, or they were already massive bands that we're talking about that had, I mean, same thing with like, Rick Springfield had Living in Oz came out that year, which was hugely popular for him. And,
right.
There's just there's so many albums. There's so many.
Yeah. There's also Heaven 17, The Luxury Gap.
Oh yeah.
Which has one of my favorite records ever is Temptation by Heaven 17. And in fact, Tina Turner was such a huge fan of The Luxury Gap that she recorded 2 songs with them, one a Bowie cover a year later.
Are we ready for May? Are we ready to work hard for the money?
I think I was going to mention that too.
I knew you were. Go ahead, do it, Donna.
Well, just
Miss Donna.
Was this the biggest album of her career?
It was actually her second biggest.
Okay.
The biggest was 79, Bad Girls.
Oh,
it's
okay.
the only #1 album that she had, and it sold like double platinum, whereas Hard for the Money basically did like a platinum.
I just find it fascinating that in 1983, disco is so dead, and yet Donna Summer is so massive, because it just speaks to how great she is, and her voice and her.
A lot of the really great vocalists of that era survived. Like Diana Ross has a record that year. Donna Summer's got a record. Gloria Gaynor's still kicking around. So there's a couple people that survived it intact. More, but not as many that did as that didn't.
Right.
But yeah.
But none of them really had the success that Donna did that year.
No.
And this was kind of a resurgence for her because she had a couple of albums she had a change of record label, and then the first 2 records on Geffen didn't do as well as her previous stuff. So this one was a big resurgence for her, and it was a big resurgence for her.
Huge.
Yeah. And she would continue on for the rest of the 80s doing moderate hits. I mean, she still had a successful career. She didn't have any top 10s or anything like that after this album, but she still did really well and was able to sustain a career when pretty much, like Rob said, all those other disco people just kind of died off and fell by the wayside.
Yeah.
So good on Donna. How about we also reach for the beach? The Fix. Holy shit, I love The Fix so much. And Reach the Beach came out that year, May 15th. It was their second album. Great singles. One Thing Leads to Another, Saved by Zero. I love those songs so much. But one that was not released I don't think it was released as a single in America, but MTV played it, and that is Sign of Fire. Holy God, I love that song. That is such a great record. Great record.
Little side note, Bob went on tour with these guys with his band Winter Hours, but it was not this year. I mean, it was later. But
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because Winter Hours was later in the 80s, right?
Yes, they were later in the 80s, and then in the early 90s they were.
Right, right.
Yep.
Man, that's another good band that people should go look up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's my husband, too. Can I talk about Ministry?
No.
Sure.
May I talk about Ministry? So I love With Sympathy, the album that came out on May 10th of that year. And
Ain't got time.
yeah, I think that this was such a great synth pop kind of album. And I know Al Jorgensen really, I think he had mixed feelings about this album. He sort of disowned it for a while, or just was saying that the album that, like, I believe it was Arista that they were on, was sort of forcing him to be like more poppy and synth pop and new wavy than he wanted to be. But then later he kind of recanted it. I think it was in a documentary or something that he was saying like he only heard hardcore music after this. And so the combination of like that plus the synth pop equaled industrial. And he was really, this was really one of the first, precursors to industrial music. And, then they really went full on industrial after this album. But, and the funny thing about this album too, is that he's sung in a fake English accent.
Yes.
Guys from like Chicago or whatever.
I wanted to tell her revenge.
Yeah. Effigy.
Oh, that's
Work
hilarious.
for Love. Oh man, this is such a good record though. I love it.
He remixed Work for Love later too to make it a little more industrial. I
just remember sitting in my room and playing it over and over. I love it. I love the album cover with the hand and everything. It's cool.
Yeah.
So whether he liked it or not, I liked it. Thank you, Al.
Right.
Yeah. Don't ever ask him to sign that.
Right.
May also gave us New Order's Power, Corruption, and Lies. They put a Latour photo painting on the cover and kind of a concept album, but it's got some really great stuff. Age of Consent is probably one of the best opening tracks. It's been on our lead tracks, opening track show, and also on our bass show. But the Age of Consent is fantastic. Your Silent Face is probably one of the best breakup songs ever. Why don't you just piss off? That whole thing is great. It's got The Prisoner, so if you're a fan of, if you're a nerd about that stuff like I am, you're like, oh my God, there's a song about The Prisoner. And there's a song called The Village. This is awesome, right? It's a really good, complete record. It sort of is the New Order comes out of their cocoon that they went into coming out of Joy Division, and this is who they are. They kind of know what they are now. Yeah. And it doesn't sound dated still at all. So, and it's surprisingly orchestral in places, which is nice. Which when you would have seen that band in 1980, you would never have thought that they'd be melodic.
I've got a couple of things that come out this month that Anthony and I share in a big way, and that is Iron Maiden and the debut album by Dio, the debut solo album by Ronnie James Dio. Iron Maiden put out Peace of Mind, which is my second favorite Iron Maiden album. And we're talking about The Trooper, Flight of Icarus, To Tame a Land, Quest for Fire. It's an incredible record. But the Dio album, Holy Diver, that picks up our story from way back in January when Dio was basically out of Black Sabbath and they're having a squabble over how the live album is going to be remixed. And then he just goes off and does this incredibly killer first solo album with basically a new band called Dio, Holy Diver. It is unbelievable. I don't think the production is very good. I think it's got way too thin sound to it. I don't think the bass is enough. And I think the guitar has too much of a trebly, crunchy kind of sound to it. But otherwise, the songs are just unbelievably good. So a couple of good metal picks for Anthony and me. Yes.
Right on.
And usually in these things, I do like a prog report. There ain't jack shit going on in the 80s for prog, especially in around 83. So there ain't nothing to talk about. Well, we did have Marillion, that's true. But I got a Yes album to talk about in the second half of the year, but nothing really is happening. So, Rob, what else you got?
I was going to bring up Weird Al Yankovic.
What?
Weird Al's first album debuts.
Really?
Produced by Rick Derringer.
Oh, God.
Say what you want.
1983.
Say what you want. No, say what you want, man. When the 80s got really horrible and people thought the world was going to end and MTV was getting too full of itself, Along came Weird Al to make us laugh.
That is true.
I love
He's
it.
the only man in that decade to break Kurt Loder.
Oh, wow.
He's the only time Kurt Loder laughed on camera was something Weird Al did to him.
Huh.
That's
You
not
know.
surprising.
Yeah.
But
That's hilarious.
and nobody really knew what the hell this was or who this guy was or
No.
anything.
No.
And it comes along like it's a throwback to the 50s, the parody record, right? But the people that he got to play on those records, and Rick Derry did the production on it's not bad. I mean,
Mhm.
and people forget, he's got musical abilities. He's a musician. So yeah. And then also we have Billy Bragg, Life's a Riot with Spy versus Spy.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about that one.
Yeah. New England
such a good
is
record.
on that one. It's still a great record. Yeah.
I have one more to mention for May.
Yeah.
Which is Elton John's Too Low for Zero, only because it's like this is like his 17th record studio album, at
Right.
least. But it was a comeback kind of because it was like the previous 4 albums were pretty disappointing, like hit wise and sales wise, compared to like his early to mid 70s. So and this is the first time since Blue Moves that all the lyrics were written by Bernie, and he reunited with like that core 70s lineup of like Davey D. Nigel, and even Ray Cooper was on this one. So, I mean, it was pretty huge. Like I'm Still Standing, Too Low for, I guess that's why they call it the blues. Like it was pretty omnipresent. So I think this was,
Yeah, that's
I'm
true.
Still Standing was everywhere.
yeah.
Oh my God. But I did love that song. I did love I'm Still Standing.
Yeah.
That's a great song.
And-
I wasn't too big a fan of the Elton 80s stuff, but that was a good song.
No,
But that it was a nice little comeback he had in the 80s. Though.
definitely. I saw this
True.
tour also, believe it or not, at the Garden.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool. Oh, at the Garden too. That's awesome.
Oh, last thing is the Creatures released at Feast, which is the Susie and the Banshees great side project record.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, I love them so much.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that much about them. I only know a couple of records, but man, I love them.
Yes, the new romantic movement's going. It's in full swing. Susie's kind of looking to do something a little different, outside the Banshees. It's kind of when she's like, well, I kind of have this like desire to do more. And you get this and you get The Glove a little later with Robert Smith. That Susie's kind of starting to like bridge new romantic goth and pop into interesting little ways and a little bit of punk, and it's starting to go in different places. So
Yeah.
and it's an interesting record in terms of like the visual aesthetic. It's got the whole like Asian art cover. It's got, it's
Yeah, it's good stuff.
So.
All right. So let me get to my big thing that I've been waiting to talk about, because I think we should do a whole show about this. And this is the final weekend in May, and it is the US Festival. Holy shit. There was a concert film from that show that MTV played, and basically we didn't have MTV where I lived, but at the office supply place that my father worked, that town did have MTV, and he got cable in his office, and I would spend literally a whole weekend in that office, like just spend the weekend there and just watch MTV. And I saw that concert film and have seen it since probably about 100 fucking times because I love it so much. And the US Festival, this was the second one. The first one was 82. This is the second one. And they had it divided up into a new wave day, a heavy metal day, and a rock day. And it wasn't really that well organized. I mean, because you have like Berlin and Missing Persons not on the new wave day, but on the rock day. And I guess they just had too many new wave people to like really stack them all into one day. But the new wave day was headlined by The Clash, Men at Work, Stray Cats, Flock of Seagulls, and a bunch of other bands, Oingo Boingo, Wall of Voodoo, the Divinals. Holy shit.
I love
The
that.
heavy metal day, man. Van Halen, Scorpions, Triumph, Judas Priest, Ozzy, Motley Crue, and Quiet Riot opened the day.
Whoa.
And day 3, the rock day, is Bowie, one of the biggest shows that he did on his Serious Moonlight tour. Stevie Nicks, Joe Walsh, Pretenders, and that was the day that U2 pretty much sealed the deal for becoming the biggest band in America. When Bono goes climbing over the all over
Scaffolding or
the
whatever.
railing, the scaffolding
Yeah.
on the sound equipment and stuff. Now, it really turns a corner in 85 when Live Aid comes along. But 83, this is like his first big, like, stake in the ground, pitching the U2 flag in America.
Mm-hmm.
But there was also Quarter Flash of all bands. I really liked them. Little Steven and the Disciples of Soul. So it's a great, fantastic festival.
Wow.
The following week, they did one Country Day that nobody remembers because it wasn't included in the concert film and nobody ever talks about it. But man, I loved that. I of course didn't go to it, but I watched that film a million times. It's so
Yeah. I have seen it, but I just, that lineup is crazy. The Rock Day. Wow. The Pretenders. And I wish I was there.
I know, right?
Yeah.
All right. It's time to wrap it up. We got one more month to go. June 83. What's happening in June?
Stevie Nicks.
I was going to say, speaking of Stevie Nicks at the US Festival.
Yeah. The Wild Heart.
Like a week later, her second solo album comes out. Which
is produced by Jamie Iovine and recorded pretty much right after her best friend Robin Anderson passed away. And this was sort of like her... I think Stevie had sort of a renewed energy, like an appreciation for life after. I mean, she was devastated. I know that, it was clear, but she also kind of had this momentum going in her life. And she just recorded the most beautiful album. I think this is my favorite one of her solo albums. And it was huge too. I mean, Wild Heart, If Anyone Falls, Stand Back. And I want to just talk about the last song on the album, which is Beauty and the Beast. Because it was basically, she said it was inspired from a 1946 film that had the same name. It was like one of her favorite movies. But she basically said that this song encompasses her whole life and represents how everyone is either a beauty or a beast, but usually both. And they had a full string orchestra and a grand piano on this beautiful, beautiful track. The lyrics are so moving. And during the session for this, the recording session, she and her backup vocalist, they wore like these long black gowns and they served champagne to all the visiting musicians and stuff to set the mood. But that song, go listen to that song, Beauty and the Beast. It is fantastic.
It's interesting that you say that too, because she and her girls, the backup girls, which is Sharon Ceylani and Lori Petty, always dressed to go into the studio. They always, like presented themselves professionally, and they always looked all of Stevie's finery and all that kind of stuff. They always made an effort in the studio. But yes, that's really cool that and I just wonder if Stevie got that idea from when Fleetwood Mac recorded Songbird, because it was in a big concert hall. They sat Christine down at a grand piano. They gave her roses. They gave her champagne. Yeah. And they just it was all to set the tone for what that song is going to sound like.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure they did. I'm sure it was like, because they had this whole orchestra there, the strings, and they had, it must have been pretty cool just to imagine being a fly on that wall.
Great job getting your orchestra liquored up before they have to play.
Well, it came out.
Turned out well. I also want to say a couple of my favorite Stevie songs on that album. One is called Sable on Blonde. Phenomenal song. Enchanted is good. But my two favorite songs from the session are not on the album. One was on a movie soundtrack and one was the B-side to Stand Back. And that is Violet and Blue and Garbo. Holy cow. Those are great tunes.
I thought you were going to say Nightbird for a minute, but yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a good one too. That's also the year I talked about that on our SNL show that she was on Saturday Night Live, and they did Stand Back and Nightbird.
Right.
So good.
Anyway, that was one of my two. I'll do my second.
Well, I know the other one.
Finale.
Okay. Rob, what else you got?
I just asked one simple question: who are you going to call?
Oh God.
No.
June 7th. Ray Parker Jr. releases Ghostbusters, which is probably the most annoyingly catchy song of the month, or for a while. It's, by all accounts, just a horrible record, but man, is it catchy.
Popular.
Yeah, it's painfully catchy. So yeah, we should talk about that. And we just did. So I also want to talk about the fifth studio album by Talking Heads. Speaking
Yeah.
in Tongues, it just had its anniversary. It's still great. It's fantastic. Um, it's on the Rolling Stone list of 100 best records.
Yeah.
But everybody knows "Girlfriend Is Better" and "Burning Down the House." Those are kind of
Yep.
the two.
Yeah.
But you've also got "This Must Be the Place." You've got, I like Moon Rocks. That's just me. "Slippery People's" great. Talking Heads is like fully comfortable with being the weird art rock band, and they've totally found their footing. They know where they're at. They're confident.
Yeah, it's a great record.
Chris Franz just is fantastic on it. I don't think he gets enough credit. Harrison's, everyone talks about, oh, David Byrne did, but Harrison and Franz are pretty incredible on it. And then
Right.
Tina's bass works on some of that stuff is almost funk. It's a little more funky, right? Than you've got.
Tina's a phenomenal bass player.
She is.
Yeah, but it's a little funkier than some of their other records too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is sort of like the time you hear Talking Heads, because I heard "Burning Down the House." I saw it on MTV, and it's like, what the hell is this, right?
Oh man, I hated that song.
What?
I hated it
Huh?
because it was awful. Now,
oh my god, I love it.
No. I came around to the Talking Heads phenomenon later, and then of course now I fucking love that song. But at the time,
and part of it too
hated it.
Is that it just stuck out so much compared to the records that was coming out. So when they played it,
very true.
For me, it was always hard to hear it on like the radio or on MTV because it was coming in and out of records that there wasn't a way to make it fit. It was kind of annoying for a while, right?
And MTV wouldn't stop playing that song. And if it's on the radio, you can just flip to another station. If it's MTV, you're stuck. All you can do is wait it out. And I got to the point where I was like, just burn the fucking house down already. Just fucking burn it down. Now I love them.
So, yeah. But it's still, Swamp is used in like a ton of films later too, which is kind of weird that no one sort of expects. It's just got the whole thing just flows, man. It's like, and part of this too is it's on Sire Records. And this is sort of this period, Steph, you might be able to speak to this too, where Sire is really realizing that there's a zeitgeist in America for like the B-52s and Talking Heads and these bands that don't fit a niche, and they start really hammering away.
Yeah, Sire was always the kind of underground cool label in a way, even though they were a
this
major.
is kind of when they start to get the momentum.
Yeah,
you get that Ramones record, you get Talking Heads. I think you get Madonna a little later. So I think part of this is that the label sort of knew that this was a band that was interesting and had things to say and do, but I don't think they knew what they was. I think it was just, let's let the cool kids go play in the room and we're going to put it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Burning Down the House kind of shows that, because it's like, this is the single. We don't know why it's the single, and we're going to play it into the ground. We're going to burn it into everyone's minds. I got the record because someone said the whole record is fantastic. I'm like, that Burning Down the House song, I can't get away from it, right? It's everywhere. But then I heard Girlfriend Is Better, and I'm like, okay, I get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really resilient record, and you hear, I think for the first time, David Byrne taking influences from other styles of music. In the same way that Peter Gabriel also kind of does around this time, you're starting to pull in music from Africa and South America and things, and it's starting to kind of seep into what you want to do with your music. And you see them doing some stuff. And again, the drumming, the bass is fantastic on it.
Yeah.
All right, Steph, bring it on home with the grand finale.
My favorite band in the whole world, the first band I ever saw live. Well, Go-Go's and Police, but the Police, Synchronicity, their final album, the most successful album. I mean, it won 3 Grammys for them. And this is like almost fitting into the same category for me as the U2 War record in terms of like, it was everything to me. This was another record that I constantly practiced my drums to. I even my band covered like Synchronicity 2, Oh My God, and Every Breath You Take from this album. So it was just, I don't know. I mean, it was one of those things that was just so influential in my life, but it was a massive commercial success everywhere
Yeah.
you went. And it was pretty amazing that they broke up right after. They just this was huge, and then bazoom goodbye. Like it was I can kind of understand walking out on a high note, and then they all went off to do their own things, and really successful. Obviously Sting was a huge success solo, but in a way it was kind of like, I think they had more. I don't know.
I love the 2 title tracks.
Synchronicity 1 and 2.
I think they're possibly my favorite Police songs. I know.
I believe it, though. Those are great songs.
So good. And they're so different from each other too. But the flip side of that is I also really love Ms. Gradinko.
It's such a good, that's Stuart Copeland's song on that album.
Yes.
I
First
hate
of all,
Mother, though.
Oh no, Mother is fantastic.
Oh God, I don't.
It's so strange, but I love it. But I am such a Stuart Copeland fan. I mean, to the point where he just makes me want to burn my drumsticks and never try
I know,
again because he's so amazingly good.
Yeah.
Oh, that guy.
Like, there's a great fill on Oh My God, when he's like that. It's like, it's just, he has the knack for getting perfect little fills in,
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great album. And I think that this album was sort of like a little bit less of the reggae influence that the first 4 albums had. And they were saying they were going more like production heavy, kind of like heavier synths and stuff. And
right.
A little more world music rather than like just reggae kind of sound. But yeah.
I got to say, Walking in Your Footsteps also.
Oh, yeah.
I love it so much.
Yep.
All right. Well, shit. That was a hell of a year.
Holy
and that was only 6 months of it.
Oh, my God.
But oh, my God. So much stuff in 1983.
Woo-hoo.
An unbelievable year. We are going to be back next week with the second half of 1983, July through December. So make sure you join us for that. Before we go, though, first of all, we got a couple of picks of the week. Rob, why don't you do yours first?
So we haven't really been able to jump into this because we've had so much going on.
Yeah.
Last couple of weeks, but we lost Andy Rourke from the Smiths. And for people in my generation, it's not quite a Beatle dying, but it's kind of up there. And I don't think people really understand that that rhythm section of the Smiths of Andy Rourke and Johnny Marr is something a lot of bands will never, ever have again. So make it a point sometime in your world today or tomorrow to listen to The Queen is Dead or Meat is Murder by the Smiths and just listen to the guitar work on it. That's my first pick for the week. Also, an amazing songwriter named Cynthia Weil passed away. She wrote You've Lost That Loving Feeling and We Got to Get Out of This Place by the Animals. She also wrote Just a Little Lovin' by Dusty Springfield. All these great songwriters of that era are going, and people don't really appreciate, one, the craftsmanship, and two, just how great pieces of art these people are leaving. So want to mention that. But getting into the real world, Bar Italia are they're English. They're on Matador. They're going to be big, and they have an album called Tracy Denham. It's got everything you want. It's black. It's post-punky. It's got some really great drumming and guitars on it. So I recommend that. And also The Wedding Present with 24 songs. Basically, they put out a 7-inch single every month for a year. And all the songs on it are now collected on an album called 24 Songs. So there you go. Those are my recommendations.
All right.
And a Donna Summer documentary.
Well, that was going to be my pick. So we haven't done this in a couple of weeks, and I wasn't here last week, and I've got a list of things that I want to get in, but I can't this week. So I'm going to, because there's like a new Yes album and a new Foo Fighters album and another documentary that I watched and all kinds of stuff. But I'm going to go with the Donna Summer documentary because we're talking about 1983.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about a big year for Donna. And I just watched it this afternoon, and Jesus Christ, is it sad. Oh. It is one of the most depressing. I know her music is so full of joy and fun and energy and life. Mm-hmm. And this was the saddest fucking documentary I've ever seen.
Oh my God.
And I know. And it talks about every change in her career, how it affected. She struggled with fame. She struggled with, being a mother versus being a public figure. She, they talked about sexual abuse in her teen years and a suicide attempt. It was just unbelievable. The whole documentary is put together by her daughter, who was basically trying to piece together who her mother was, because her mother was such a complex person. Wow. And it is an amazing watch. It is, but it's not a career retrospective. That's what's interesting about it. And it doesn't necessarily go strictly chronologically, because they'll take something from, like a 1985 album and then come back to something that happened in 79 after that. So it's more of a discussion of who she was as a person.
And
I want to see that. Oh, it's so good. It is such an eye opener.
Wow,
so
I didn't know any.
I highly recommend it. It's on HBO Max.
Okay.
It goes into her origins as a music theater performer and just all kinds of stuff. It is incredible. Her struggle with religion versus the sex symbol that she was at the beginning of her career. And oh my God, it is phenomenal. So definitely go watch it. All right. So definitely let us know. You can email us at modernmusicology1@gmail.com and just let us know about this episode. What's your favorite record from 1983? Something that you remember well from 83 that you want to share with us that maybe we didn't get to. If it's something that happens in the second half of the year, hopefully we'll get to it next week. So drop us a line. Let us know if you enjoyed the show. Give us a rating on whatever platform you're listening on. Drop a comment on our Facebook page or our Instagram. And you can also find more about each one of us. Stephanie, where would people look for you?
Well, you can find me on Bandcamp under my name. You can find me on Facebook at Stephanie Seymour Music. On Instagram at there_r_birds. Also, I have a website, therearebirds.com. And then you can also find me on Spotify and all those like fabulous streaming platforms.
All right, Rob.
Hey, kids. You can find me on the needcoffee.com podcast Weekend Justice. Also doing some writing here and there for Ink 19. And then I do a radio show on KDHX called Juxtaposition. It's on Wednesday nights from 7 to 9 Central. If you miss a show, you can easily just go to the archive stream and listen to it later. You can listen to it live if you want. Maybe there's a Gila monster outside and you don't really want to go outside and water the plants. You can stay inside and listen to that on the radio for 2 hours. Then I also have a radio show Mondays from 6 to 8 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, as opposed to Greenwich Happy Time, which is 1 to 3 Eastern at 12 to 2 Central, called Antics on Louder Than War Radio. It has best been described as fright rock at its finest, so I'll wear that. And you can check that out on Louder Than War Radio on their website.
All right.
And what about you, Alan?
I've got cosmiccreative.com, KOZMIC creative.com. Go there and you'll find everything. All right. So this was a long show. So we'll be back next week with the second half of 1983. Join us then. Till then, take care. Have a great week. And we will see you round the bend.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping at the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.